Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. I hope you enjoy. This Strange Encounter, written by I.S. Zox. Tamalma was hunting. He gripped his spear between his six-fingered hands and used his 6 legs to move through the forest. Thanks to his many eyes, he had a superb vision of the surrounding forest. The trees already began to losing their leaves, and he would need the meat of a Deathworlder or something similarly sized to get his family over the winter. Luckily, the crunching orange leaves of the trees created the perfect environment for tracking and hunting large animals. He raised his carapace that closed his torso and waited for a sound to come to his ear. He waited silently for minutes, nothing that indicated any animals nearby. This close to the village, he would have been lucky to catch anything. Guess he would have to search over the hills, between them and the large, salty lake. After he had moved over the hills, Tamalm swept the area for the Deathworlder or a Telblek. He was about to give up when he stumbled through the forest and saw an unknown creature standing on a clearing right next to a tree. The unknown was like anything Tamalm had ever seen before, with only 4 limbs. It used 2 of them to stand upright, and apparently the other 2 to eat, seeing as it removed a few of the red leaves from the tree it stood next to. It had no carapace. Its entire body was covered beneath black, flexible skin. He couldn't see any eyes or ears, so it was likely that it hadn't spotted him yet. Tamalm was fascinated by the creature and would have observed it for hours, but the fading sun reminded him that he didn't have much time. Could he hunt the creature? Surely he could. It might be taller than him, but it didn't have any defenses like a carapace. He stepped onto the clearing, careful not to make too much noise. Apparently, he failed, as the creature turned around and looked towards him. Tamalm decided to rush his prey. He ran towards the strange thing, when some kind of shiny rock appeared in the upper appendages of it. It didn't look sharp, so Tamalm ran further and almost reached the creature, when the sound of thunder reached his ears. Pain erupted in his body. He looked down to see a hole in his clothes. Whatever this was, he would survive it. He closed in on the target. Then another thunderous sound reached his ears. The pain in the side of his body massively increased, and he looked down again. Cracks appeared in his carapace. Tamalm knew that a broken carapace meant a slow and certain death. He tried a last-ditch effort to take down the creature, but it was fruitless. He crashed down, and the impact did the rest to his carapace. He looked upwards to the creature standing above him. It had attacked him from a distance with lightning. He could only be a god or another kind of supernatural creature, and he had foolishly attacked it and was now dying from it. These were his last thoughts before he fell unconscious. Tamalm awoke. He laid on a bed, one much softer than his one at home. Where was he? How did he get here? What had happened? Then he remembered his encounter on the clearing, the strange supernatural creature and his cracked carapace. He had fallen unconscious from pain, which meant that he should be dead. Was this the afterlife the elders had spoken of? So why did he still feel pain? His arms and legs were held together by a long, thick string, and he was completely unable to move them. He looked down to the crack in his carapace. It was no longer there. Only a small bump that ran along the entire former position of the crack was visible. The crack itself was sealed. How was this possible? Fully broken carapaces could not heal. He observed his surroundings. He was in a room with walls that had a color of snow. The material was made neither of rock nor from wood, or any material he knew. Maybe it was similar to the weapon the creature had wielded against him, but he wasn't certain. The hole suddenly opened in the wall, and another 2-legged creature entered, with what had to be a snow-colored clothing. Its looks were strange. It had a completely different head to that from the ground. Also, its fingers looked different. It looked at him, then looked at the flat plate made from the war material. It shakes its head around, then left the room again. He had to either be in the afterlife or the domain of the gods, he concluded. If the god he had met could injure him with lightning, then there should be one capable of healing his carapace. But why? He had attacked a god. Shouldn't it be an offense punished by death? Had they perhaps only healed him to make sure that he would survive to meet their judgment? He shivered. He had to get out of here, even if it meant that they would only kill him later. Timon concentrated. Now he could see the fine lines that indicated the passage in the wall. Then the passage opened again, and the god of storms, the one that had attacked him, appeared in the room. He looked at him with his eyeless face, then grabbed him at his legs and threw him over his shoulder. Timon panicked. He was not prepared to die so young. He could only look backwards as they moved further from the bed and through the passage. They marched through the gigantic house, with magic lightings and openings that didn't let anything through them. There was nothing to see when he looked outside. Timon saw a few additional gods, all of them looking strangely different from another. Then the one carrying him moved through another passage, into a small room with 2 seats on either side. They flung him into the seat on the right, secured his body in position with flat, white strings, and took place on the left. Then a large clunking sound ran through the room, and Timon was suddenly weightless. He used the time to look out the opening right next to him and saw a large half-moon-shaped ring of colors of water, leaves, and wood. It slowly became bigger as he kept looking at it. Was this how the gods saw the ground? Then he turned left and saw the one touching the wall of lights and differently colored protrusions. Suddenly, he was pressed into his seat. The sudden weight left him without breath, and he struggled to regain air. This continued for about 10 seconds before he was weightless again. The next minutes were silent. Timon couldn't talk to his neighbor and wasn't even sure they would respond, so the two just sat there, silently. Timon began feeling the little bit of weight and was slowly pressed into his seat again. He looked outside to see flames raging around the room he was in. He screamed. Instantaneously, a hand rushed over to his mouth and pressed it shut. Timon tried to remove the hand, but his arms were still bound. He was forced to watch as the flames became stronger and stronger, and he was pressed more and more into his seat. He was rattled around. The force pressing became stronger and stronger, and Timon wondered whether the flames, the rattling, or the force would kill him first. After what felt like an eternity, the flames subsided, and he began feeling lighter. The hand was removed from his mouth, and he could fully breathe again. He looked left and saw the creature stare focus on the wall of light. Then the same force pressed him back into his seat, and he was rattled around again. He caught his breath rather quickly, then looked back left. Why were they so tense? Then he heard a loud rumbling from below. It almost sounded like thunder, but continuous and louder. It became louder and louder, then it suddenly cut, and everything became still. He lay on his seat and was back to normal weight. His seat neighbor also looked much more relaxed than before and turned around to look at him. They moved from their seat to the middle, pulled him from his seat, then pressed on a light at the board. The floor below them sank downwards, and the walls were replaced by strange round objects of many different sizes. Then the way downward stopped, and they stepped from the piece of floor now hanging just above the ground, which looked as if it had burned recently. They put me back on their shoulders, ignored the hot surface, and moved forwards. After a short time, he saw a massive object with a snow-colored upper side and the ash-colored lower side. He couldn't estimate how high it really was, but it surely was high. Behind it was a large surface of water, which was typical coloring and small waves. After being carried even further, he recognized where he was. The large object had stood on the shore on the large salty lake over the hills, and he was currently on his way towards the hills. That the god of thunder really bothered to carry him personally back to his village. Then his carrier suddenly stopped and put him onto the ground. He immediately recognized the clearing they were in. With a strong pull, he was flipped upside down, and his weakly protected underside and joints were exposed. They pulled out a knife and made a shiny material, which looked really sharp, then moved it towards Timon's underside. "Please, don't hurt me! Please, don't hurt me!" were Timon's thoughts before he closed his eyes and expected a cut at any time. The pressure holding his limbs together disappeared. He opened his eyes and saw that they had cut the string holding his limbs together and had moved a little bit backwards. He turned himself upside down and stood up. He pointed his right hand at himself, then told the god his name. "Timon!" They pointed one of their fingers on them and said "human" to him. They picked up his hunting spear and flung them through the air into his hands. Then they made a gesture with their hand. He interpreted it as to come closer. They continued, then turned around and stepped into the forest. Tamalm followed. They were a little foot faster than him, but occasionally waited for him to catch up. After a medium amount of time, they stopped and switched to moving very carefully. Tamalm closed up with careful steps himself until he was directly next to them. They pointed into the forest. Tamalm followed their finger and saw a Deathworlder in the distance. Before he could sneak close to it, they raised their weapon at the animal. A large booming sound, which almost pierced the ears of Tamalm, ran through the forest, and the Deathworlder dropped dead on the ground. Tamalm moved to the corpse and began picking it up. He held it in his hands and offered it to the god. They declined and helped him put the Deathworlder on his back. He imitated the gesture that had used to tell him to follow and began marching back to his village. After a while, he turned around to see if they had kept pace with him, but he saw no one. He moved back to where they had hunted the Deathworlder, but he found only footsteps into the other direction. He followed them and ran back to the shore. The large object was still on the sand, but the floor panel that hung on the lower side was gone. The flames lit up on the lower side and the loud rumbling was back. Almost as if it was weightless, the object began moving up into the sky and became smaller and smaller. Tamalm looked after it until it became too small to see. Then he turned towards the hills and walked. With his hunting prize at his back, he had a story to tell. Sarah took off her helmet. After the atmosphere had stabilized back to Earth levels, she untied her braid and flung her red hairs all over her shoulder. She unmuted the radio and hailed the UNS Pioneer 10. UNS Pioneer 10, this is Star Fox 1, do you copy? Star Fox 1, this is the UNS Pioneer 10. You are loud and clear, over. Pioneer 10, do you have me on radar? We have you on radar, calculating necessary maneuvers now. She thought back to her encounter with the strange semi-arachnid down on the planet and had a chuckle. What's so funny, Sarah? Her radio cackled. You know, Zhang, this is the first encounter between humans and another sentient species, and the first thing that happens is a shooting. What a terrible way to encounter one another, she laughed. Well, you shot him. You could have sat back. The surveyor suits are resilient enough to stave off pistol fire. Well, exploration protocol states that the life of the surveyor goes first, and that shooting is a valid way of self-defense. Also, he gave us valuable probes and some insights into formation of conscience. That should be at least worth the efforts of the Giorgio put into bringing him back up. Yeah, you definitely owe Giorgio one of your cake rations. I've only got 2 of them left. I have to save them already. You know that we still have 2 months left on our mission. Giorgio, you heard that. 1 cake ration from Sarah for you. Zhang, you bastard, she sighed. All right, 1 cake ration for Giorgio. She paused again. Is the navigation plan finished? Lee is going through it, but she should finish it in a few seconds. Yep, it's ready. Sending it to you now. Sarah waited a few seconds before her control display blinked, and she was greeted by an orbital map with trajectories and maneuvers necessary to redock the Pioneer. Let's see. 4 hours until rendezvous, so about 5 hours until I'm back. Would you please fill out the report with all the things that happened on the Pioneer, darling? All right, love, I'm going to do it. But only if you're going to have some fun tonight. Thanks, darling. I wanted some yesterday already. Sarah, you know that all of this goes into protocol, and this time around someone is actually going to read it. Of course I know. That's why I said it. And everyone's going to know that you cheated me out of a cake ration. See you in 5 hours. See you in 5 hours. Sarah closed the radio channel and focused on the maneuver list in front of her. Next maneuver in 40 minutes. There was ample time to start filling out the documents. Planet Spectre 1746392b. Inhabitable? Yes. Suitable for colonization? No. Reason for classification? Inhabited by primitive sentient species. Further indirect study needed. See attached first contact report. Signature Sarah Witt. She looked at the maneuver list again. 15 minutes until next maneuver. Computer, open first contact report. Opening first contact report. First contact report P10-1. System of first contact. Species nickname. Species homeworld. Species biological data. Technological level. Course of first contact. Future diplomatic outlook. Additional information. She carefully filled out the data, describing her encounter with the alien in great detail, until an alarm ripped her from her recollection. The first maneuver was due in 30 seconds. Sarah watched the automatic flight control system execute the maneuver, then looked back at her report. She finished the protocol, then relaxed back in her seat. She still had about 2 hours until the rendezvous. 1 week later. Sarah sat in a mess hall of the Pioneer 10 together with the entirety of the ship's crew. New orders had finally arrived from Earth. "Did we get concrete orders?" she asked. "No, just proceed at your own caution order," Captain Clues answered. "So to all of you, what do we do?" "I would definitely like to survey the planet more," Zhang said. "But we're not supposed to interfere in the affairs of primitive civilizations. Our previous actions might have already caused some trouble already." "Sarah, what do you mean?" "Well, I love fieldwork, but Zhang is right. We could cause massive trouble if we continue with ground missions. The guy we kidnapped probably already thinks that he's met a god. If more people report things like this, we will create a mass religion about us." "So our consensus is that we should stop ground missions. I would then suggest that we deploy our Sentinel satellite and keep watch. This is going to give us orbital pictures and radio data once they advance technology." "That's probably our best option," Sarah replied. "Let's do it." "Zhang, you agree?" Zhang nodded. "Lee, Pierre, Giorgio, Peter, you agree?" All except Lee nodded. "Lee, what do you mean?" "I want to add that we should probably install an asteroid defense system in the system. We don't want to return to some time to see them all dead like the dinosaurs." "We don't have a portable asteroid defense around, so we would have to ask back on Earth. We will keep it to the Sentinel for now. Anyone else disagreeing?" Everyone shakes their head. "Sarah, Peter, you go outside and move the Sentinel from outside Cargo Bay to the Star Fox Cargo Bay. Sarah, you take the Star Fox into the polar orbit and release the satellite. After you return, we'll survey the other planets in the system and then head back home." "Why do I have to do this? You know that the whole procedure takes 3 days," Sarah complained. "Peter has much less deployment time than me around here." "That's an order, Sarah. Besides, you're the one who handles loneliness the best, and you know that we installed a copy of the video game library for you." "Rock, paper, scissors, Sarah," Peter told her. "Whoever loses has to deploy the satellite." "Rock, paper, scissors," they yelled. Sarah pulled her hands into a fist, only to look at Peter's flat hand. "Ah! All right, I'll do it." "Told you so," Cluse remarked mockingly. Sarah was back in the small orbital shuttles of the Pioneer 10. She looked at the console of Star Fox 2, then sighed. The orbital maneuver that would increase her inclination by 90 degrees was almost complete. She put the helmet on the NBCS suit on, made a pressure test, then she regulated the atmosphere of the cabin to 0. After the maneuver finished, she left the Star Fox through the side hatch and opened the external cargo bay. She took a large satellite from the cargo bay, connected it to a cable and flanged it away. Then she used her EMU to follow it until she was stopped by a cable. She extended the solar panels, deployed all along the antenna, checked the FTL communication system, and extended the radar shield. Sarah activated the automatic orbital maneuvering system, releasing the satellite from the cable and returning to Star Fox 2. Back in the cockpit, she took one last look at Sentinel's satellite before activating the RCS and maneuvering away. The Sentinel would maneuver itself into its final orbit. Time to return to the Pioneer 10. Tamalm looked into the night sky. He was thinking about what had happened to him several days ago. When he returned home, he had been shocked to find that he had been away for 3 days. Most had initially called him a liar when he had talked about his encounter, but he had wisely taken the godly string with him. After realizing that it was uncuttable, and after seeing the bump on his carapace, all of them changed their mind. Now he was pondering, when would human god of thunder visit him again? He didn't know. He only knew that the gods lived in the sky, somewhere up there, amongst the stars. He looked there every night for a sign, even a small one. "Come on, give me a sign," he thought to himself. He stood there for a while until a small star ran over the night sky and disappeared below the horizon. Something clicked in his head. He understood now. They wouldn't come back. Not for him. But somewhere up in the sky, human, the merciful and generous god of thunder, had a watchful eye on him. End of story. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, Lord Azrakal, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian, Thank you very much.